The unexpected arrival. The morning light of three suns cast prismatic shadows across the crystalline spires of Nexus Academy for Advanced Species. Students from 47 different worlds move through the transparent corridors with practiced precision, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic civilization. Each species moved according to their designated paths, following protocols established over millennia of careful social engineering. Zix9, a crystalline being from the Quartz Collective, resonated with satisfaction as he observed the perfect order. His faceted form caught and reflected the light as he glided toward the morning assembly. Beside him, Veltar, a serpentine draconid with scales that shifted between dimensions, maintained the exact prescribed distance of 2 meters, optimal for interspecies comfort zones. Another standard cycle begins. Veltar hissed through his translator, his voice carrying the musical tones of his homeworld. The Efficiency Council reports our academy maintains a 99.97% optimization rating. As expected, Zix9 chimed, his crystalline structure harmonizing with the academy's frequency. The Nexus Academy represents the pinnacle of galactic cooperation, every species in their designated role, every action calculated for maximum benefit. The Grand Assembly Hall accommodated thousands of students, each section specifically designed for different physiological needs. Aquatic species occupied the fluid-filled upper tiers, while silicon-based life forms gathered in the high-temperature zones. The gaseous entities swirled in their containment fields, and the energy beings pulsed in their stabilization chambers. Director Korth, a massive cephalopod from the administrative worlds, extended his neural tendrils to interface with the Academy's central communication system. His chromatophores shifted to command attention as his thought waves rippled through the assembled students. Distinguished pupils of the Nexus Academy, his mental voice resonated through every consciousness present. Today marks a momentous occasion in our institution's history. The Galactic Council has voted to grant provisional membership to a new species. A wave of surprise rippled through the assembly. New admissions were rare, occurring perhaps once every few centuries. The last edition had been the Void Dancers, and that integration had required 300 cycles of preparation. The species is designated as human, from a small world in the Orion Arm called Earth. Director Korth's chromatophores flickered with what might have been uncertainty. They have achieved basic spaceflight and have demonstrated unique qualities that the Council believes may contribute to our collective advancement. Murmurs filled the hall. Zix9 felt his crystalline structure vibrate with concern. The Academy operated on precise calculations and time-tested methodologies. How could a barely spacefaring species possibly integrate into their advanced curriculum? Their representative will arrive within the hour, Director Korth continued. I expect all students to maintain standard protocols and extend appropriate courtesy. Remember, every species brings value to our collective. As the assembly dispersed, speculation ran rampant. The Nexus Academy's reputation rested on its ability to educate the galaxy's most advanced minds. What could a primitive species possibly offer? The answer arrived in the form of Sarah Chen, a 17-year-old human girl with dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She stepped from the transport pod wearing a simple blue uniform, carrying nothing but a small backpack and an expression of barely contained excitement. The reception committee, composed of senior students from various species, stood in perfect formation. Krell, a hovering energy being who served as student coordinator, pulsed forward. Welcome to Nexus Academy, human Sarah Chen. I am Krell, your designated orientation guide. You have been assigned to Residential Sector 7. Room 342. Your biological requirements have been accommodated. Your academic schedule will commence tomorrow at the standard interval. Sarah grinned, an expression that caused several committee members to step back in alarm. The display of teeth triggered predator warnings in at least 3 species present. Thanks, but just call me Sarah. And wow, this place is incredible. She spun in a circle, taking in the soaring architecture. Is it true? The walls are grown from living crystal. And those gardens floating up there, how do they maintain cohesion without visible support structures? Krell flickered in confusion. New students typically remained silent during orientation, absorbing information according to protocol. Questions came later, after proper integration procedures. The architectural details will be covered in your orientation materials, Krell managed. If you will follow me to your quarters. Oh, sure. But can we take the long way? I'd love to see more of the academy. Are those null-gravity tubes? I've been dying to try one. We had some theoretical models back on Earth, but the power requirements were insane. The committee exchanged uncertain glances. No new species had ever shown such immediate enthusiasm. As they proceeded through the academy, Sarah's questions came in an endless stream. She asked about everything. The bioluminescent guide strips, the atmospheric regulators, the interspecies communication networks. Her curiosity seemed boundless, her energy inexhaustible. The dining facilities accommodate 4,000 distinct nutritional requirements, Krell explained as they passed the central cafeteria. Your human specifications have been programmed into the synthesis units. Synthesis units. Sarah's eyes lit up. So it's not actually cooked food. That's fascinating. Does it replicate molecular structures or work on a more quantum level? Back home, we're just starting to experiment with printed food, but nothing this advanced. Before Krell could respond, Sarah had already approached one of the units, examining its interface with intense focus. The haptic feedback is incredible. And these symbols, they're not just linguistic markers, are they? They're actually incorporating sensory data for species that communicate through other channels. A group of students had begun to gather, drawn by the unusual sight of someone actually interested in the mundane technology they took for granted. Among them, Zix9 observed with growing puzzlement. This human seemed to lack any understanding of proper protocols, yet her questions demonstrated a surprising grasp of underlying principles. The next morning, Sarah arrived at her first class, Advanced Quantum Physics, 15 minutes early. The instructor, Professor Veth, a gaseous being contained within a mobility sphere, had taught at the academy for over 1,000 cycles. He had seen prodigies from every advanced civilization, each following the prescribed methods of learning. Today, we examine quantum entanglement across dimensional barriers, Professor Veth announced, his vaporous form swirling with color-coded equations. The standard approach requires precise calculation of quantum state vectors across 14 dimensions. Sarah raised her hand, another unprecedented action. Students never interrupted the initial presentation. Yes, human Sarah, Professor Veth managed, his gases flickering with surprise. I was wondering, have you considered approaching this through topological transformation instead? If we treat the dimensional barriers as manifold boundaries rather than discrete separations, wouldn't that simplify the calculations? The classroom fell silent. Several students activated their recording devices, certain they were witnessing a fundamental misunderstanding that would serve as a cautionary example. Professor Veth's gaseous form shifted to a deep amber, his species' indication of intense thought. That is an unorthodox approach. The established methodology has been proven optimal through millions of applications. Oh, I'm sure it works great, Sarah said quickly. I just thought, sometimes looking at things differently can reveal new patterns. We had a similar problem with atmospheric modeling back home. Everyone was using fluid dynamics, but when someone applied musical harmonics theory, it opened up whole new predictive models. For the first time in his extensive teaching career, Professor Veth found himself genuinely intrigued by a student's suggestion. He began manipulating the holographic equations, incorporating Sarah's topological approach. The results were unexpected. Fascinating, Professor Veth murmured, his form brightening. The computational requirements decrease by 34%. This method introduces variables we had not considered, but the efficiency gain is undeniable. The other students watched in stunned silence as their instructor, the legendary Professor Veth, who had written 17 definitive texts on quantum mechanics, began enthusiastically exploring a first-day student's casual suggestion. Word of the incident spread quickly through the Academy's networks. By lunch period, Sarah found herself the center of intense curiosity. The cafeteria, usually a model of organized efficiency with each species maintaining appropriate distances, began to experience unusual clustering patterns as students maneuvered to observe the human. Sarah seemed oblivious to the attention, chatting animatedly with whoever happened to be nearby. She attempted to use eating utensils designed for beings with tentacles, laughed at her failures, and somehow ended up sharing food with a species that communicated through chemical excretions. "Your consumption technique is inefficient," observed Katak, an insectoid student known for his rigid adherence to protocol. His compound eyes focused on Sarah's attempts to manipulate the multidimensional food containment system. "Probably," Sarah agreed cheerfully. "But efficiency isn't everything, is it? Sometimes the journey is as important as the destination. Want to try some of this?" The synthesizer called it approximation of human pizza, but it tastes more like spiced cardboard. "Still, it's kind of fun." Tic-Tac's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Consumption is for nutrition. Why would the experience matter?" "Because that's what makes us who we are. Our experiences, our attempts, our failures. Back home, some of our greatest discoveries came from complete accidents. Penicillin, microwave ovens, sticky notes, all happy accidents." As she spoke, Sarah absently began folding her food wrapper, her fingers moving with practiced ease. Within moments, she had created a small origami crane. She placed it on the table, where it stood in perfect balance. "What is the purpose of this construct?" Tic-Tac asked, his analytical mind struggling to categorize the action. "No purpose, just something beautiful." Sarah smiled. "My grandmother taught me. She said that in creating something unnecessary, we prove we're more than just survival machines." The simple paper crane became an object of intense study. Students from a dozen species gathered around, analyzing its structure, debating its meaning. For beings who had optimized every aspect of their existence, the concept of creating something purely for aesthetic pleasure was revolutionary. The afternoon brought Sarah's first practical examination, a standard test in the gravitation chamber. Students were required to navigate a constantly shifting gravity field while solving complex equations. The test measured both physical adaptability and mental focus, core requirements for advanced spacefaring species. Zix9 watched from the observation deck as Sarah entered the chamber. Most students prepared extensively for this test, running countless simulations. The human had spent her preparation time asking questions about the chamber's construction and chatting with maintenance staff. As the gravity fields activated, Sarah stumbled immediately. Her body, evolved on a single gravity world, struggled to adapt to the rapid changes. She fell, rolled, and crashed into walls while trying to manipulate the holographic equation interfaces. "Predictable," murmured Veltar, his scales rippling with superiority. Humans lack the physiological adaptations necessary for multi-gravitational environments. But something strange happened. Instead of fighting the gravity changes, Sarah began moving with them. She started laughing. Actually laughing, as she tumbled through the air. Her movements became a dance, using the gravity shifts as partners rather than obstacles. And somehow, while spinning and tumbling, she was solving the equations, not through careful calculation, but through pattern recognition, intuitive leaps, and creative shortcuts that no instructor had ever seen before. "This is impossible," Krell pulsed, his energy form flickering with disbelief. "She's not following any established methodology. Her approach is chaos." But chaos, it seemed, had its own order. Sarah completed the test in record time, not despite her unorthodox method, but because of it. When the chamber finally stabilized, she stood in the center, dizzy but triumphant, her solutions floating perfectly arranged in the air around her. The observation deck was silent. They had witnessed something that challenged fundamental assumptions about learning, adaptation, and problem-solving. The human hadn't conquered the test. She had transformed it into something entirely different. As news of Sarah's performance spread, the Academy began to buzz with unprecedented discussions. Students who had never deviated from established patterns found themselves questioning methodologies that had stood for millennia. Teachers discovered their most engaged classes were those where Sarah asked her endless questions. That evening, Zix9 found himself seeking out the human. He discovered her in the Academy's garden dome, sitting cross-legged on the grass, surrounded by a mixed group of students who would never normally interact. "You approach problems differently," Zix9 stated, his crystalline form harmonizing with curiosity rather than certainty. Sarah looked up and smiled. "Everyone does, don't they? That's what makes the universe interesting. Where I come from, we have a saying. There are many paths up the mountain, but the view from the top is the same." "But efficiency," Zix9 began. "Efficiency is important," Sarah agreed. "But so is innovation, creativity, and joy. You've all mastered the optimal solutions to known problems. But what happens when you face something completely new? Something that doesn't fit your models?" Zix9 considered this. His species prided themselves on logical perfection, but Sarah's words resonated with an uncomfortable truth. The galaxy was vast and full of unknowns. Perhaps there was value in chaos after all. As the first cycle ended, the Nexus Academy found itself subtly transformed. Schedules remained, protocols existed, but something new had been added to the mix. Questions, experiments, and a strange concept the human called thinking outside the box. Director Korth observed these changes with a mixture of concern and fascination. The Academy's efficiency ratings had dropped marginally, but something else was happening. Students were engaging in unprecedented collaborative projects. New solutions to old problems were emerging. Innovation was replacing mere optimization. The human girl had been there only one day, yet already the ripples of her presence were spreading throughout the institution. And this, Director Korth realized with a mix of trepidation and excitement, was only the beginning. Adaptation and revolution. The gravitation chamber incident became known as the Chen maneuver in Academy records, the first time a test had been passed through what the instructors reluctantly termed creative adaptation. But for Sarah, it was just another day of discovery in her new home among the stars. 3 weeks into her tenure at Nexus Academy, Sarah had unknowingly become the catalyst for the most significant cultural shift in the institution's 1,000-cycle history. The changes started small, a student questioning a long-held assumption here, an instructor considering an alternative approach there. But they grew like ripples in a cosmic pond. "The harmony matrices are destabilizing," reported Veltar during a senior student council meeting. His scales flickered between dimensions with agitation. "Standard interaction protocols are breaking down. Students from incompatible species are attempting collaboration." Krell's energy form pulsed with concern. "Yesterday, I observed a crystalline working directly with an aquatic on a joint project. They circumvented 17 safety protocols by creating what the human calls a buddy system. The deterioration is accelerating," added Tak, his compound eyes reflecting multiple data streams. "Efficiency ratings have dropped 2.3% academy-wide." But Zix9, who had spent considerable time observing the human, resonated with a different frequency. "Have you analyzed the Innovation Index?" The council fell silent. The Innovation Index was rarely consulted. The Academy prided itself on perfecting established methods rather than creating new ones. "Innovation rates have increased by 47% since the human's arrival," Zix9 continued. "Professor Veth has submitted 3 new theoretical frameworks based on discussions with student Chen. The engineering department reports breakthrough developments in adaptive technologies. The debate that followed would have been unthinkable a month ago. Tradition versus innovation, efficiency versus creativity. Concepts that Sarah had introduced simply by being herself. Meanwhile, Sarah remained blissfully unaware of the philosophical upheaval she was causing. Her days were filled with the joy of learning, though her approach continued to baffle instructors accustomed to more conventional students. In the Great Library, a crystalline structure containing the accumulated knowledge of 10,000 civilizations, Sarah had made an unusual discovery. While most students accessed information through neural interfaces or quantum data streams, Sarah preferred what she called browsing. "It's like treasure hunting," she explained to librarian Zoth, an ancient being whose tentacled form had tended the archives for centuries. "Sometimes you find the best stuff when you're not looking for it." Her browsing led to an incident that would further transform academy culture. While exploring restricted sections containing theoretical works deemed too speculative for practical study, Sarah discovered a collection of abandoned theories from various civilizations. "These are brilliant," she exclaimed, her excitement causing several nearby meditation pods to flicker. "Look at this. The Vanari proposed using emotional resonance for faster-than-light communication. Everyone said it was impossible because emotions couldn't be quantified. But what if we combined it with the crystalline harmonic matrices?" Librarian Zoth extended a tentacle in mourning. "These theories were archived for good reason, young human. They violated established parameters of possibility. But that's exactly why they're valuable." Sarah's eyes shone with enthusiasm. "The best innovations come from combining things that aren't supposed to work together. On Earth, we call it thinking outside the box, but really it's about realizing there is no box." Within days, Sarah had organized what she called a hackathon, a concept that required extensive translation across species. The idea was simple: take abandoned theories, mix them with current knowledge, and see what emerged. The event drew participants from across the academy spectrum. Even professors attended, drawn by curiosity about this human approach to problem-solving. The next 20 hours became a whirlwind of interspecies collaboration that defied every established protocol. A gaseous being worked with a silicon-based life form to test consciousness transfer theories. Aquatic students collaborated with energy beings on fluid dynamics in quantum space. Sarah moved between groups, asking questions, making connections, and occasionally offering what she called crazy ideas that just might work. The results were unprecedented. 3 new propulsion theories emerged. A breakthrough in universal translation occurred when someone combined abandoned linguistic frameworks with quantum entanglement principles. Most remarkably, species that had maintained careful distances for millennia found themselves working side by side, their differences becoming advantages rather than barriers. "This is chaos," Professor Veth observed, his vaporous form swirling with unprecedented colors. "Beautiful chaos," Director Korth corrected, watching the organized disorder with all 8 of his eyes. "The human has introduced something we had forgotten: the joy of discovery." The transformation reached its crescendo when the Academy competition was announced. This annual event traditionally showcased each species' specialized abilities in their designated fields of expertise. Teams were formed along species lines, competitions followed strict parameters, and results were predictable within acceptable margins. Sarah's hand shot up during the announcement assembly, a gesture that no longer surprised anyone. "Yes, Student Chen." Director Korth's chromatophores shifted with what might have been amusement. "Could we form mixed species teams this year? It seems like combining different perspectives might lead to better solutions." The suggestion sent ripples of shock through the assembly. The competition had followed the same format for 800 cycles. Species competed separately to demonstrate their unique contributions to galactic civilization. The protocols began Administrator Kex, a geometric being known for rigid rule enforcement. "Protocols evolve," Sarah interrupted gently. "Isn't that what makes a civilization great? The ability to adapt and grow." The debate that followed involved the entire student body and faculty. Traditional voices argued for maintaining established order. Others, influenced by recent events, supported the radical change. The discussion itself was revolutionary. students openly challenging administrative decisions, professors considering student input. In the end, Director Korf made a decision that would be studied by organizational theorists for generations. This cycle, we will permit voluntary mixed species teams alongside traditional entries. The transformation was immediate. Sarah found herself approached by students from species that had barely acknowledged each other's existence. Traditional rivals began discussing collaboration. The Academy's careful social structure, maintained through centuries of protocol, began reshaping itself organically. Sarah's team became a microcosm of this change. It included Zix9, whose crystalline precision complemented her chaotic creativity; Veltar, who had overcome his initial skepticism to become fascinated by human unpredictability; and a dozen others from incompatible species who discovered they worked brilliantly together when they stopped trying to maintain proper distances. The competition challenges were designed to test specific capabilities: gravitational manipulation, quantum calculation, energy transformation, temporal perception. Each traditionally favored certain species' natural abilities. "We're going to lose spectacularly," Veltar observed during their first team meeting. His scales rippled with concern. "We lack specialized advantages in every category." Sarah grinned. An expression her teammates had learned indicated impending disruption of conventional thinking. "That's exactly our advantage. We can't rely on natural abilities, so we have to innovate. Besides, has anyone actually read the competition rules?" It turned out no one had, not thoroughly. The rules, written centuries ago, focused on achieving objectives, not methods. Sarah's interpretation revealed flexibility no one had previously imagined. "The gravitational challenge requires moving objects through a complex field," she explained. "Everyone assumes this means individual manipulation. But what if we create a cooperative system? Zix9 provides structural calculations, the aquatics handle flow dynamics, the energy beings power the system, and together we build something none of us could achieve alone." The approach was revolutionary and remarkably effective. During the competition, traditional teams excelled in their specialized events, but struggled outside their comfort zones. Sarah's mixed team never dominated any single challenge but performed consistently across all categories by combining abilities in unprecedented ways. The temporal perception challenge provided the most dramatic example. Species with natural time sense typically excelled, but Sarah's team created what they called a time web, a networked consciousness that allowed them to share and amplify their collective temporal awareness. "Individually, we're limited by our biology," Sarah explained to the stunned judges. "But together, we transcend those limitations. Isn't that the whole point of galactic civilization?" When the final scores were calculated, Sarah's team hadn't won. They had placed third overall. But their consistent performance across all challenges, despite lacking specialized advantages, sent shockwaves through the Academy. More importantly, their approach had demonstrated something profound. Diversity and collaboration could match or exceed specialized excellence. The implications rippled far beyond the competition, challenging fundamental assumptions about species roles in galactic society. In the weeks following the competition, the Academy underwent a renaissance. Mixed study groups became common. Research projects increasingly involved interspecies collaboration. The rigid pathways that had defined student life for millennia became fluid networks of interaction and innovation. Sarah found herself at the center of this transformation, though she insisted she was simply being human. Her dorm room became an unofficial gathering place where students from incompatible environments somehow managed to coexist, united by curiosity and the excitement of discovery. "You've disrupted our entire social order," Zix9 observed one evening, his crystalline form resonating with something that might have been humor. Sarah looked up from where she was teaching origami to a group that included beings without hands. "Have I just asked questions and suggested we try things differently. You all did the actual changing. That may be the most human thing you've said," Veltar commented, his scales shifting in patterns that indicated deep thought. Your species seems to catalyze change simply by existing. The Academy Council convened an emergency session to address what some termed a crisis and others called an evolution. The debate lasted 3 days, with perspectives ranging from dire warnings about abandoned traditions to enthusiastic visions of a transformed future. Director Korth listened to all viewpoints before rendering his verdict. The galaxy is not static. It grows, evolves, faces new challenges. For too long, we have perfected existing solutions rather than preparing for unknown problems. The human has reminded us that adaptation and innovation are not just valuable, they are essential for survival. The decision to formally integrate human methodologies into the Academy curriculum sent ripples throughout the galactic education system. Other institutions began recruiting human students and instructors. The rigid species-specific educational tracks that had defined galactic civilization started evolving into flexible, collaborative frameworks. Sarah's first year at Nexus Academy concluded with a ceremony unlike any in the institution's history. Instead of the traditional separate species gatherings, students mingled freely, sharing customs and perspectives. The usual formal speeches gave way to interactive presentations showcasing collaborative projects. A year ago, I was just a kid from Earth, excited about seeing the galaxy. Sarah addressed the assembly. Her words translated into dozens of languages and sensory modalities. I never expected to change anything. I just wanted to learn. But maybe that's the most important lesson. We all have something to teach and something to learn, regardless of our origins. As she spoke, the visual display behind her showed images from the past year. The origami crane that started philosophical debates, the hackathon that produced breakthrough theories, the competition that redefined excellence, the countless moments of connection between beings who had maintained careful distances for millennia. Humans have a saying, "It takes a village to raise a child." But I think it takes a galaxy to raise a civilization. Every species, every perspective, every crazy idea contributes to our collective growth. The response was unprecedented, a harmony of appreciation expressed through sound, light, vibration, and methods beyond human perception. For the first time, in its 1,000-cycle history, Nexus Academy resonated with unified purpose rather than segregated excellence. In her dormitory that night, Sarah found a message waiting on her personal terminal. It was from the Galactic Council, co-signed by representatives from every member species. Student Sarah Chen, your presence at Nexus Academy has initiated a transformation that extends far beyond education. The Council formally recognizes humanity's unique contribution to galactic civilization, the ability to see possibilities where others see only protocols, to find connections where others maintain divisions, and to inspire change through simple existence. Welcome to the galaxy. We have much to learn from each other. Sarah smiled as she read the message. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and new opportunities to explore. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders she had yet to discover and friends she had yet to make. Outside her window, the 3 suns of Nexus set in spectacular fashion, their light refracting through the crystal spires in patterns that seemed to dance with possibility. Sarah pulled out a sheet of paper and began folding another crane, her human hands creating something unnecessary and beautiful, a small reminder that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest actions. As news of the Academy's transformation spread throughout the galaxy, application rates from previously overlooked species increased dramatically. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization for millennia began to shift, making room for innovation, creativity, and the radical notion that diversity might be the greatest strength of all. The girl from Earth had changed more than an academy. She had planted seeds of transformation that would reshape galactic culture for generations to come. And this was just the beginning of humanity's contribution to the cosmic community. In the years that followed, historians would mark Sarah Chen's enrollment at Nexus Academy as a pivotal moment in galactic history, the day the galaxy learned that sometimes the most powerful force for change is simply the courage to ask, what if we tried it differently? But for Sarah, it was simpler than that. She was just a human being human, asking questions, making friends, and proving that in a universe of infinite diversity, there's always room for one more perspective. And sometimes, that one perspective can change everything.